what you want to tell us about first, but
I was thinking about the time with Aaron sitting on my lap.
okay. So you've often been in houses that you felt uncomfortable in.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what's the first one of those that springs to mind?
Well,
No, I want you to tell me. I want to cut my question out completely.
right.
So I just want the first time that's
Yeah.
do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. I think the worst house I can remember actually being in was one that my parents had. They've lived in quite a few places, and this one was a very big house. I didn't like it at all. It felt very cold, although they actually put central heating and everything. I didn't actually live there at the time. I was already married and had my own home, but I used to go and visit, and I didn't like the place at all. It always had a very cold and eerie sort of feel to it, although it was bright and airy, but I just didn't like the place at all. Just didn't feel at all comfortable there.
So, did you feel there was a presence there then?
I don't know, I just didn't feel comfortable there. Didn't feel happy there. I wouldn't want to have lived
Right,
there.
Let me put the question to you again. What was the main reason that you didn't feel comfortable being there?
I don't know. Just didn't like the place, just didn't feel happy there.
Okay. So, what was sort of like the next house that you sort of moved to? Did you feel uncomfortable there?
Well, I didn't live in that house.
Okay, we'll start again, Dad.
We lived in a
Sorry,
shop.
I was wrestling.
Mm.
Yeah, when you say we, you might have to explain yourself. So if you say I, if you put it from your point of view all the time.
Oh, right, okay. I lived with my family in a shop at Dis in Suffolk, on the Norfolk-Suffolk border.
No, I have to start again. This has got to be perfect. This is a final project, I'm afraid. Right. So we've got a plane going over. So right from the top and sort of right through as many houses you can think of and any weird experience you've had.
Right.
Can you tell us, from your point of view,
Mm-hmm.
your weird experiences?
In 1971, I moved with my family to a shop at Dis in Norfolk, which was quite a rambling old place. And I used to sit on the stairs because the phone was in the hall at the bottom of the stairs, and I used to sit on the stairs and speak to my then fiancé on the phone. And there were times when I used to feel a very cold draught coming down the stairs, and in that draught I could smell perfume. It was quite an odd sensation, and I didn't care for it very much.
Why does this happen, eh? Hello? Hello? I'm fine, thanks. Just a couple of days.
That's Jim's
Gemma?
programme.
Could you shut your door, please, and turn it down a second, please?
Do you want to shut the door? Right, you ready for his
I
sign?
can still hear it, Gemma. I need it. Yeah, well, please. Switch your light on and shut your doors for sort of 10 minutes. Okay, so take 5 million from the top right through to sort of, from the beginning to the end, whatever. Can you tell us from your point of view your weird experiences involving different houses?
The first experience I can remember, I was about 18.
You'll have to say in sort of in houses. You'll have to explain everything. that
All
you
right.
mean,
Okay.
Because I'm not going to say
Okay.
anything about it at all.
All right.
Oh no!
So who would that be this time?
Don't believe this.
This was due in before the end of January. I sent it all off last week. All of it, except just hers and somebody else's. Actually, what?
Right, okay, well...
Susan Fletcher. It's so annoying. I mean, they're only just down the road. I can't send it off. I've got nothing to send it off with. So I don't know. I'm going to have to write to the NCMA and see what they can do about it.
Right. Thank you. Let's blow the fluff out of my ears.
Oh, sorry.
So, in the order you were going to tell me about them, what weird experiences have you had involved in houses, and see if you can repeat that in your answer at the beginning.
Oh, the first house I can remember. What?
I don't want to rule the first house. I just want.
The first house I can remember ever having any unusual experiences was a shop that I lived in with my parents prior to my marriage. It was a fairly old shop. It had a cellar, which I wasn't at all happy about, not liking cellars or attics or places like that. And it was sort of a rambling old shop. I used to have to...
It was a rambling old shop again, please.
It was a rambling old shop. I used to sit on the stairs in the hallway when my fiancé used to phone me up. And I can remember feeling a cold draft coming down the stairs, or the draft was coming down the stairs as I sat there, and on that cold draft there would be the smell of perfume. Apparently a lady had actually committed suicide in the house, and I'm pretty convinced that it was her perfume I could smell. It certainly wasn't any perfume that we wore. The next experience would be
Can
at...
Can I actually just ask you there? There's no way you could have just possibly been imagining something.
I don't think so. No, I've got quite an acute sense of smell.
I don't think I was imagining.
I don't think I was imagining it. At the time I had my mind on other things and wasn't even aware, wasn't thinking about perfume or anything like that. But it wasn't a perfume that we wore, so it was an unusual fragrance. The next experience I can remember, I was married and we had our own little cottage, which at the time we bought it was exactly 100 years old. I sat in the lounge with my second child, who would have been about 9 months old, on my lap, and all of a sudden he shot bolt upright on my lap. He was rigid, he was staring at the door, his eyes were really wide, and I could feel the hair on the back of my neck going up, and I felt very cold and very, very nervous. I couldn't see anything, but he obviously could, and of course at that age he was much too young to tell me what it was he could see. I always felt that there was something about the cottage. My eldest son would often tell me about a grey lady who would come out of the wall and sit on the bed, on the end of the bed, and talk to him. He did have quite a vivid imagination, things we would talk about, because he was 3 years older than his brother, so obviously for the first 3 years he was the only child, and there weren't really many children around of his age for him to play with, so he used to make up his own imaginary friends. But at the time, with the experience I had with my other little boy, I can well believe that he really did see somebody sitting at the end of his bed. He said that she was kind, she would talk to him. He certainly wasn't frightened of her. But there were...
The heating's just come on now, so I have to... Hang on a second. Right, well, I'll ask you. So, this lady apparently then didn't frighten the child?
No, not at all. No, he seemed quite... I wouldn't say happy about the situation, but he certainly wasn't worried about the situation.
Did you see her at all?
No. No.
I didn't see her. I'm going to chop me out, so you're going to be going, no.
Oh, right. No, I never did see anything at all. Other than, as I say, I did feel my hair going up the back of my neck on the one occasion. But and there were occasions I vaguely remember when I did feel that there was something else there, but I never did see or hear anything out of the ordinary.
So is that the extent of everything there? You think? Is there anything, everything?
At Boughton, yeah. Yeah.
Anything else you think about?
I don't think so. Can't remember.
Okay. I'll just come here a moment. And you can just interject when you feel like it here. Problem is, I don't want to adjust the stereo image, so I don't want to move this too much. Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3. I'm going to have to, though, aren't I? You just still talk in, please.
What do you want me to say?
Yeah, you're too far over to the left now. That's the problem. I'm going to have to get right in close.
Pull that chair out then. What's that down there? Is it yours or Gemma's?
Gemma's.
Oh, right. Who's that then? Testing
1 2 3. I've been recording all that. I remember a time at my present house that my younger sister, who I suppose must have been at the time about 6 years old, had said to my mum that she'd seen a man standing between the hallway and the kitchen, just where the door would be. The door was open at the time, and as far as I remember, my sister had said, my sister had told my mum, I don't know, about 10 minutes after, she had apparently seen him standing there. And when she mentioned it, Mum had said, well, there's no way anybody could have been standing there at that time. Now, whether that was a figment of her imagination, whether she was talking about something else altogether,
well, it seems a strange thing.
Don't really know, do we?
It seems a strange thing for a child to suddenly say that they've seen a man standing in their own kitchen when obviously there was nobody there and could not have been anybody there.
You were out in the kitchen at the time, weren't you?
Yeah, that's right, yeah. I didn't see anybody. No. But there again, they do say that children are far more susceptible to these things than they do see things.
Mm.
The house is a modern house. It's highly unlikely. There was only one couple lived here before us, so it's highly unlikely that anything has actually happened in the house. But obviously, the land that it stands on could hold the key. No telling's what. It could have been here a long time ago.
Mm. You also didn't say actually that the Grey Lady at Boughton had actually she died in hospital or whatever. You hadn't said that. Well, I'll pick up on that.
That might not be her though. You see.
Well, no, but it was mentioned.
Mm.
I remember actually. I don't quite know who I am. I don't quite know. You've been talking about it, and so I'll just say you.
Mm-hmm.
I remember actually you telling me that this lady had apparently died in hospital, or a lady that had once lived in the house, and you wondered whether that was actually this lady.
Yeah, there was a very tiny elderly lady who.
I'm talking now to you rather than asking you a question. So I'm just here talking to you as well. We are being interviewed by somebody. We are talking to this microphone.
Yeah, so am I.
Well, it's just that you sounded like you were answering my question.
Oh,
whereas
right.
I'd rather you chat This is
Right.
a chat rather than a question and answer session.
Yeah. So how should I start then?
I don't know, but
The lady who lived in the house years before was very small and very frail, and the next door neighbour told us that one day they hadn't seen her and they were quite concerned about her, and he searched all through the house, couldn't find her anywhere, and apparently she'd fallen out of bed, got tangled in her bedclothes, and was laying pretty well concealed under the bed when he found her. She was obviously taken to hospital, and she did die at some point later in hospital. There was something else I was going to say now, and I don't think.
was
No, don't. There was something I was going to tell you about. It made me think of something else. Oh, what was it? Oh, it's gone.
I better stop.
It was. Are we recording? It seems rather strange that we actually lived in the house for 6 years, and apart from the 1 or 2 experiences I've mentioned, had no problems at all. We were very happy there. The only reason we left was because we were in a small village, miles away from the local town, and transport was difficult. The people before us also had children. The people who we bought the house off also had children, and they were there for some time and did quite a bit of work on the place as we did, and they seemed very happy there. But ever since we have left, the people who have bought the house have been either retired people or people without children, and have never stayed very long at all.
Yeah, my school teacher had a place, actually bought our house. I knew because I got talking to him one day, and
Yeah, and it just seems strange to me that
me too, yeah.
with children in the house, everything was fine, but after us, people moved in with no children, and things did not seem to go at all well for those people, and they didn't stay there very long.
No, it's always being advertised in the newspapers, isn't
Yes,
it? It's always,
yes,
yeah,
yeah.
about 2
Which
years
is just
and
a
that's it,
strange,
and they're
yeah,
out of the house.
that's right, just very strange
Perhaps this lady wants
coincidence.
wants you know, perhaps
She
was,
likes children.
yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Glad I remember that.
Well, when I was asking you, basically.
Yeah. I had never experienced night terrors. I have a brother and 2 sisters, sisters both younger than myself, but with my...
I'm starting my watch beeps. Yeah, can you actually go from sort of like something that frightened me a lot, something like that?
Yeah.
A particular thing that frightened me years ago. Whatever.
A particular thing that frightened me some years back when my little boy was about 2.5, 3 years old. He developed what was classed as night terrors. He would wake up in the night, or appear to be awake. His eyes would be open, but they would be sort of glazed and, not fully awake. And he would come downstairs looking for me. He would walk straight by me, he would be crying, he would be very fretful, calling out for me, but whenever I tried to approach him, he would scream, he would cry, and he would insist that I was not his mummy. He desperately wanted his daddy, and if his dad was out in the evening, I would have to phone wherever he was to get him to come home. And in fact, it got so bad that I would have to make sure I had got a phone number any time so that I could call his daddy home. One problem being his daddy did work away from home from time to time, and that made it most worrying, because the only person then I could get to help him and to calm him down was his brother, who was 3 years older than himself. 3 years older than himself. That's wrong.
So he's older than him.
His brother, who was 3 years older, and
It's going to be difficult to cut that. It's the only person.
The only person who I could get to calm him down was his older brother. He was 3 years older. and I would bring him down, and he would cuddle him and talk to him, and he would eventually calm down. Now, this all happened in a very modern house. We hadn't been there very long. It had only been built 2 years when we moved in when it was brand new. Then, when we moved to our next house, which was slightly older, although built at pretty much the same time, he was old enough to tell me when the last time it happened that he could see 2 mummies, and he didn't know which was the real mummy. But one of the mummies, he said, reminded him of a witch, and he was very frightened. We were standing on the landing at the time, and he wanted to go to the bathroom, and I was standing by the bathroom door, but the other mummy was apparently standing on the landing, and he said that she looked like a witch. Now that frightened me very, very much, but as he got older, the night terrors gradually got less and less, and whether he can actually remember anything about these or not, I don't know. But it was a very frightening time.
I'll ask him anyway. Yeah. Again, making a formal answer out of it, what did you put that down to?
I don't really know what the actual cause was. It could have been the fact that his daddy worked away from home. He was feeling a little insecure. It could have been something he'd eaten at the time, which had some kind of effect on him. I really don't know how to explain night terrors. It was a very frightening time, and I just hope that when my grandchildren come along, they don't have the same experiences.
From the description, it seems that it's all in the mind. Is it at all possible that what he saw was actually, what is real, what is unreal, but was actually part of the house?
I really don't know. I must admit, at the time he was having these night terrors, I was quite convinced that he'd perhaps got some kind of brain tumour or something which was giving him these vivid pictures in his mind or whatever. But obviously, after speaking to the doctor about it and reading up on it in books, it does seem quite a common occurrence in little ones. Possibly an overactive mind, but at that age I think that would be a little hard to explain.
That's great, because straight after that, it was like things under beds, things in wardrobes, anything like that you remember from when you were little?
When I was a little girl...
You'll have to get closer into my...
When I was a little girl...
Okay.
When I was a little girl, we used to be told by older children, I can't remember who now, but somebody told me at some point about this, if we were naughty or whatever, this nasty person used to stick nails in you and bury you under the path, and...
You popped.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What would this nasty person do? Take it from this nasty person would.
This nasty person would catch you, stick nails in you. I had this awful vivid picture of nails being driven through me, and you'd be buried under the path. And this used to frighten me so much that whenever I came down our garden path, which was a concrete path, I would literally run as fast as I could, because I felt sure this person would grab me and pull me down under the path. It was a very frightening thing, and I always had a very vivid imagination as a child. And the least little thing would sort of frighten me and upset me.
Right, but did you ever sort of wake up with any nightmares you can remember?
The one main nightmare I can remember when I was a little girl, living at the same house, it was something to do with a computer. Now, I can't remember how old I was, and I know I used to have to go to bed fairly early at night, so I don't think I ever saw anything on the telly which was frightening enough to make me dream about computers. But this computer would appear on my wall, but it would be in the shape of a tiger's head, and it was so close to my bed. I used to just lay there and stare at this apparition, so to speak, on the wall, and I was so frightened. It used to speak, but it was the tiger's mouth that was moving, but it would be like a computer voice coming out of it. I can only imagine that something perhaps like Doctor Who or something of that type of program had instilled this picture in my mind. I can't think where else it could have come from.
So were you imagining it? Were you half asleep?
I really don't know. It was just very frightening, and it happened more than once.
So
It wasn't just the
once. I don't know
once.
whether I was half asleep or whether I was imagining it, but I saw it, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't know if I was asleep or half awake or what, but
I want a punch to go out on, so
Oh.
I don't know whether I just imagined it altogether, whether I was half awake, whether I dreamed it, or whether it was actually there. But but in my mind,
it was there.
That's what I want to go out on. Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if I was half asleep or dreaming, but in my mind it was actually there.
It's a bit short, really.
Oh, God.
I don't know whether I was just imagining it or...
Actually, Pete, it's 10:10. I've done no work.
I don't know whether I was just imagining it or I was half asleep, but as far as I was concerned, it was actually there. So I want to stretch that out just a little bit more, otherwise it sums up too quick. Doesn't balance with the rest of the story. Right?
I don't know whether I was actually dreaming, whether I was half awake, but it was there. I could see it on the wall, and it was there.
Yeah. Right level, so
Yeah.
right volume if you like.
Because tell me when I haven't got something else, because you know me, I go gabbing on. I'm only wanting to get what you
Right.
want on here, but don't
Okay.
spoil it.
Well, tell us about your weird experience.
It's a true story, and it was told to me by a friend who I worked with during the war whilst I was in the WAFs. She lived in London and had 2 little daughters. Her husband was abroad in the army. I know he was abroad, but I think he was in the army. So long ago now, so many years ago. Janet and the 2 little girls were lying in bed when they saw her husband's face appear in the fireplace. She said they were not frightened by it, but shortly after that she heard, I suppose from the War Office, her husband had been killed in action. I can't remember any more details regarding this, only that she put her little girls in a boarding school and she joined the WAFs. She was a very nice person, and I would not doubt her word for a moment.
Well, if I can just ask you, so when you say she saw her husband's head in the fireplace, how do you mean by that?
His face appeared. She said it appeared. They were laying in bed, and I suppose the bed was facing, because a lot of rooms years ago had old-fashioned fireplaces in. And they laying in bed, and she said his face, they must have been looking at the fireplace, sort of things that were laying there, and his face just appeared. It just seemed to come into the fireplace.
And how long had he died? He just died.
Well, she thinks that moment they saw his face appear, that was when he was killed. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's what it would strike me as. Yeah.
Yes,
kind of.
that's what she said.
I've heard of stories like that.
Yeah,
kind of thing
only of
before.
course this is here 50 years ago. I mean, I've forgotten a lot anymore. She told me about it, if there was any more. You know, but I mean, I always remember that. Yeah.
It sticks in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you may as well say then about the other thing that happened.
Well, this was while I was in the WAFs. I was asleep in bed, and there were lots of beds all right close to one another. Each girl had a little space between, but you've got a lot of beds, a lot of girls in the room, perhaps 30 or 40. And I must have been dreaming, see, and it seems as though somebody on it scraped their foot, rubbing their feet on the little mat that I'd got the side of my bed, and they got in bed behind me. And somehow it woke me up, and I was sort of petrified, and I lay there, and I daren't move, and I daren't do anything. And then I realised that my single bed, there wasn't room for anyone else to get in behind me, because we had our blankets all tucked in, so they couldn't have got in. And eventually I put my hand behind me, and of course there was no one there. But it was just as if there was. It was...
So were you asleep or half awake? Or what?
Well, I don't know. I think I was asleep and it was a dream, but it was a very vivid dream because there was no one there. But it was vivid in my mind. And when I woke up, I laid there because I knew,
Right. Okay. Okay, that'll do us. Okay then, so can you tell us about the first experience?
Yeah, the first experience I had of things I didn't like was in the...
Well, actually, I'll start off by actually saying you could almost say that you have escaped death.
I have, 2 or 3 times.
Yeah. Okay, so tell us about the first time.
Right, the first time I suppose I escaped death was in 79, early 80, when the Alexander Keelan went down in the Eckfist field, and at the time...
You have to explain that's an oil rig.
Yeah. Well, most people should know what the Alexander Keelan was, a semi-submersible Norwegian rig.
Can you start again?
Oh, God.
Well, it's got to be straightforward. It's got to be, like, I escaped death, blah, blah, blah. I should have been out on an oil rig called the whatever, and then go through it from there. And can you just keep your head...
about the Ouija board first.
Yeah, okay, but keep your head. But just explain everything you say.
Oh, unless I say that afterwards. Yeah.
Whatever, yeah.
Right. Yeah, my first experience of near missing death was when the Alexander Keelan, which is a semi-submersible rig in the Eckfist field of the North Sea, went down, and I should have been on board that night that went down, only because the Norwegians had overbooked. Did I have the message at Norwich Airport to go back home again, which is 47 miles from Norwich, to go home and wait for the next couple of days before they could get us a place on the rig. And at 9 o'clock on the 9 o'clock news that night it went down, and they had a photograph of the actually the Edda, which was the actual platform that the Alexander Keelan was attached to, and I rang up the BBC and told them they'd made a mistake, and I lost 123 men that I knew on that, good friends of mine on that rig, and it seems very coincidental that the week before, that when we came off, that some of the lads was messing about with a Ouija board, and I still maintain to this day that, well, in the back of my mind, there's something would have happened to it like that. I mean, I'm not superstitious by any means, but it just seems coincidental to me that... and I sat and watched them and saw this glass fly off the handle, and hit the smash up against the bulkhead. It was amazing, and nobody was touching it. It was just incredible. And then I suppose another time was when I gave up my chopper seat for one of the lads coming in from Norway. I went out by boat, and the chopper went down, and all 18 was killed on board. Brilliant.
Thank you.
Without...
And then tell us what you saw happen. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's one night on the rig. Half a dozen of the lads decided to muck about with this Ouija board, and I always had a suspicious about Ouija boards. I don't like them. Never have seen one before, but anyway, they all came in to the room that night. I was up in the top bunk reading my book, and there was 4 of them playing. What would you call playing with it? I'm not really sure. I wasn't really taking a lot of notice, and then 2 or 3 other lads was watching, and this one lad was supposed to be speaking to his father, and obviously getting through to somebody, because he could understand whatever was saying and was going on. It was spelling out his dad's name and blah blah blah, and all of a sudden it said, "I've got to go." And when the son wrote why, he said, "Because they're after me," or "It's after me." And with that he said, "Well, don't go, Dad." But before he could say anything else, the glass just leaped off the table, and they only had their little fingers on the glass, all four of them, smashed up against the bulkhead, as we call it, and that was it. I just flew into a rage and threw everybody out. And it seems quite coincidental that about a week to 7 days, well, more than that now, about a week or 8 days, probably 10 days after, that the Alexander Keelan was lost at sea. And I still wonder why, as it was supposed to be a very sound rig. And then, of course, there was another time, as I said, when I gave up my seat on the chopper, then the chopper went down and all 18 was killed on board. And another time when I was on another rig off between Yarmouth and Cromer. And at night time we used to go fishing, and about 8:30, 9 o'clock one night, me and my friend was down on what we call the spider deck, fishing away, and I said to my mate, I said, "There's a bloody body over there, look." He said, "Don't be stupid, that's a white sheet." Anyway, we ran down a bit closer, hooked it with as best we couldn't get it anyway, and that was a body, and it seemed to be waving to us, and it was strange because we was the only rig there for miles and miles, and it seemed to be sort of holding his arm up, waving to sort of be found. So I went and reported it to the OIM, which is the offshore manager, and he wasn't at all happy to come out because he was watching a film. Anyway, he had to call the standby boat in, and instead of them bringing a body bag with them and putting their dinghy into the water to find the body, by this time obviously the current was taking it through, and it had gone sort of nearly a mile away by this time, and by the time they found it, they had to go back then to get the bloody body bag. When they come back, they'd lost it, couldn't find it, and all they found was a shoe. Luckily for them, well, obviously, if you know the rules, they had to go back into Yarmouth to be injected because they touched a body, for obviously for health reasons, and they managed to trace the shoe, and it was a purser that was lost 7 months before on a ship that went across, and they found that it was actually bought in Yarmouth, the shoe was. So all in all, I've had one or two. And then, because when I had my accident, didn't I, when I got knocked off when I fell 73 foot, and I got knocked off the rig by one of the crane drivers, and all I did was suffer with bruising. If I'd have gone either side, I'd have gone through the mash like chips. And all in all, I had quite a little time, really.
Can you just tell us about the helicopter one again? Just so in case I can split them up into separate stories, can you just sort of start that one separately? So, like, there was also a time when I gave up my seat.
There was also a time, again, in the Ickerfish field, when I gave up my seat for somebody that, I don't know whether his father or mother had died, or mother-in-law or whatever. And that chopper went down that night, killing all 18. And there was another case when I was waiting to come home, and it got to about 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and I kept thinking, "Oh God, I'm going to get home tonight." Time we get back to England, and our manager came by and he said, "What's the matter, Chester?" I said, "Oh, bloody chopper's always late." He said, "Don't worry, son," he said, "that won't be coming again." He said, "They've all gone down as well." And I felt such a prat after standing there moaning about it. So I've been rather fortunate in one way or another. Obviously my number's not up, but it's got to be up because I've got to go.
Okay, so this is Emma. Okay, so can you tell us about a weird experience you've had when you've been ill? This is like sort of like nightmares and dreams, isn't it?
I only seem to have nightmares or funny dreams whenever that I'm ill. The one that I do often remember is, say like you look into a spoon and your face is all beveled. I get awful, like, these distorted faces that come around me and like really laugh horribly. Everyone's like taunting me, you know what I mean? Everyone's like against me somehow, and that worries me. I don't really like those. Another time when I was a bit younger was whenever I had like this picture on my wall with like flowers and things on, and like they had like birds on, butterflies and little insects and animals and things, and they used to like move in the night.
Right.
Right, in the mid-1980s I was doing a one-man show in London called Lord Buckley, which oddly enough was based on the life of an American jazz comic called Lord Buckley. And Buckley had died in 1960, and this is 1985. I was doing the show, and all the way through the first act I noticed there was an American who was guffawing very, very loudly. Seemed to know most of the material that I was doing. Then at the end of the show, because it got louder and louder in the second act, till I nearly had him thrown out, and he came backstage and introduced himself as Ken Kesey, the author of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and Sometimes a Great Notion, and Demon Box, and various other books. Probably one of my greatest all-time heroes in the world. I couldn't believe that Ken Kesey had walked into the dressing room to meet me. The other strange thing was, he said to me, "Oh yeah, Lord Buckley, I used to go and watch him in San Francisco in the 1950s, and he's the man who gave me the inspiration to be a writer, and I followed his performance style. When I write, I stand up and I shout the words out and I type them down, just as if it was Lord Buckley doing the performance." So my mind was fairly blown by this. Then it was blown even further when Kesey suggested that I go back to the apartment where he was staying, and that we have a few drinks, relate and rap, etc., etc. So I went back to Kesey's place, and we get inside, and it's getting near midnight, and Kesey is an amazing raconteur. He's a wonderful performer, and in fact he's a very, very large personality. He kind of dominates the room, and I'll always remember him stomping up and down this room, telling us that he was going to give us the secret of the universe, that this was information that had been imparted to him on the night of the full moon at the Great Pyramid in Giza in 1973, when he was there with the Grateful Dead, who were performing at the Great Pyramid in Giza. As he said, I'll never forget, it was the night of the full moon. He swung his arm around, and then we all followed his arm, looked through the window, and there it was, a full moon. So I felt a bit fazed by that. Anyway, they carried on with his story, which was that he and Jerry Garcia from the Grateful Dead, he'd just come off stage, and somebody came up and said, "Wow man, Keith Moon's died." And they looked up at the full moon and thought, "Oh, Keith Moon, wow." Anyway, at this point in real time, somebody switched on the TV in the apartment where we were, and lo and behold, it was the Grateful Dead playing at the Great Pyramid in Giza. So at this point, we were all completely, absolutely astonished, splattered, and across the cosmos. The upshot of this is that Kesey then went on to tell me the secret of the universe, because he and various other people then spent 3 days inside the secret chamber of Cheops or whatever, until the divine golden bullet of revelation flashed like a crystal through their mind. But I can't tell it to you, because then it wouldn't be a secret anymore, would it?
Okay. Alright, off you go.
I remember a tale I was told a short while ago by my mother, so it's not so much my tale as hers. My father died when I was 6 years old, and it was a case of, prior to that, my mother and father slept in the front room, my sister and I were in the back room at the back of the house. A few days after he died, my mum she told me, was going to bed, went to sleep, turned over in the bed with the lights off as normal. When she was aware of the door opening, somebody walking in, getting into bed with her, turning on the side, the pressure going down on the mattress and saying, "Don't worry, everything will be all right." At this, my mum promptly turns around, looks all over her with the lights on, recognising my father's voice. Straight out of the room, what was that? Of course, there was nobody there. And ever since that, to this day, she's always kept the bedside light on, 20 years later.
Okay. This is Martin, take 2.
Shade 4. I remember something my mum told me a few years ago, so it isn't so much a story of mine as a story of hers. My father died when I was 6 years old, and it was normal household. I remember something my mum told me a few years ago, so it isn't so much my story as hers. My father died when I was 6 years old, and a strange thing happened to her, whereby a few days after his death, she retired to bed as normal, lights off, front room. My sister and I were in the back 2 rooms as normal, when she was aware of somebody walking into the room, climbing into bed.
I'll just say this is Sam's wonderful story. Well, we hope it's wonderful.
Oh, definitely.
Okay, Sam.
Right, this happened about a year ago now, and my cousins, they live about 100 miles from where I am, and my cousin, Sarah, she has 3 rabbits. Well, I say she had 3 rabbits, and what happened was I had this dream. I live in Norfolk and she lives, in Bedfordshire, and I had this dream that one of her rabbits died. Now, she had a brown rabbit, a ginger rabbit and a white rabbit, and I dreamt that the white one died. Woke up in the morning and thought, oh, it's a dreadful dream. I was a bit upset about it because I'm an animal lover myself, but I didn't tell anyone about it. And then, lo and behold, a week later, the damn thing dies. I got a phone call saying, my rabbit died. Oh, which one? The white one. And it was just the most freakiest experience ever. It was just dreadful. I felt really awful. I blamed myself for ages, but I just never ever told anybody. It was just dreadful. So I start from the phone call, so just lead on
Or
to...
just after you had the phone call?
Having heard that, it just really freed me. It was awful. I felt really awful.
Yep. Okay. All right. I've just thought of one actually
Do you
myself.
want the other one about my dad's dream?
Well, I've just thought of one actually myself. See what you reckon to this. I'll see if I can recount it. Recount it. That's right. Well, I remember it right. I had a sort of.
Recall it.
Recall it. Well, recount the tale.
Oh.
I remember right that there was a time when I seemed to have premonitions. I would dream of something, and 3 days later, this happened about 3 times. 3 days later, something similar happened. Now, the one I most remember is I'd had a sort of a bit of a. I dreamt that this boy that was a year below me in school, I actually knew his cousin I was good friends with, who was in my year. There was something wrong with his eye. It had sort of like got the white. It was just white. Almost like the eye had flipped over, and it was just like totally white. And I couldn't understand this. It was I think it was his left eye. Anyway, we were trying to get him to hospital. I actually remember having to sort of pick him up. He couldn't move or something. I don't know. He was just like, I don't know what was wrong with him, but we were trying to get him, to the ambulance, which had just arrived out at the front of the school. Now, 3 days later, the chap that I knew, who was this boy's cousin, and another boy, were just basically aggravating me in a lesson, okay? And at the end of the lesson, I got up and threw my maths book at the other boy, not the cousin, and it hit him in his left eye. Now, I don't know how much of a coincidence that is, but it happened 3 days after, like several other premonitions seem to do. But then again, I suppose you can look into you can make a coincidence out of anything, but it seems very strange to me.
Oops. Right, okay. This was a story my dad told me, and it was when he was about 4 years old. He lived in London, and he lived in like a little cul-de-sac thing. And what he used to dream was that there was this little green man chasing him around and round and round this cul-de-sac, and literally it happened every night. He just kept dreaming about this man chasing him all the way around, and he never used to stop because he was convinced that he'd get killed by this green man if he stops, right? So he just kept running and running and running, and this dream did not stop until they moved house. I mean, I don't know if it's had anything to do with the fact that he was living in that particular place and, I don't know, positioning the bed in relation to the moon or what, I don't know, but it just seemed really freaky. So why dream that a little green man is chasing you around this cul-de-sac? Beyond me, I don't know. Maybe he's just flipped, I don't know, that's my dad, isn't it?
I'll try and be consistent.
This is Matthew.
There you go. Sorry. So a relative of mine, we called him Uncle. He wasn't actually Uncle. I think he was my grand's cousin's husband or something like that. But in World War II, in the army, I believe he was in Africa, and there was some fighting, and one of his friends got killed. Well, not necessarily a friend, but someone in his battalion or whatever got killed. And that night they hadn't managed to get rid of the body at all. They were sleeping out because it was hot weather, all in sleeping bags, sleeping out. They laid the body out, and the next morning it was gone. Mysterious. Where did it go? Did he get up and leave? Was he a zombie? Who knows? That's the end. So I don't.
Okay. No, I had loads of breakfast, right? Okay. No, I was about 10 years old, and
Can you start again, please, by saying, I was 10 years old?
I was about 10 years old, right? And I used to have these weird, like, deja vu dreams, you know. And I was due for a new French book, you know, and you'd, like, go to your teacher and say, got a French book. Now, I had a dream that had the conversation with the teacher that he thought I was ripping him off for books. And I mean, I'm an innocent 10-year-old saying, look, I filled my book. I haven't been tearing the pages out. Look, I filled it in. And we were having this like conversation in my dream. And like a couple of days later, I needed a new French book. So I went up to him and I said, I have a new French book. And he said exactly the same thing back. He said, if you've been ripping pages out, you're not due for a new French book. I said, yes, look, but it's all right. I haven't been ripping, pages out. And we had this argument all over again. And I was determined to try and change what I said so I could win this argument. And it just wasn't going anywhere. And that was a bit traumatic for a 10-year-old, I'll tell you.
Okay, so this is Mo, and we're rolling. And far away, tell us your first story.
Well, the first ghostly experience that I had was at the age of about 10, and it happened in the same house that my family is living in back home in Wolverhampton. And anyway, it happened when I was little, and it happened one night. I couldn't get to sleep. I was feeling feverish, and I was sleeping in the room that was overlooking the street, and the curtains were drawn, and street light, the light from the street lamp was filtering through, and like I said, I couldn't go to sleep, and my bed was pressed right up against the window. Anyway, I just got up and looked outside the window, for just no reason really. I mean, just couldn't go to sleep. Anyway, there's an Asian family's house right opposite our house, and it was, their front door entrance was at the side of the house, and basically their neighbours used to share the same alleyway, and what happened was, as I was looking outside the window, I saw what appeared to be a kind of a figure. It kind of resembled a woman, and she was kind of dressed in white from head to toe, and it was very strange. She seemed to be kind of she was walking, but I guess I could almost say she was kind of like levitating. It's like a few inches off the ground. No, it's strange. It sounds very strange, but this is what I actually saw, and it was almost. But I mean, when I saw her walking, she was walking, kind of like very strangely, almost as if it was like, as if she was like kind of walking with a strobe effect, She's walking very jerkily, type of thing. And she just seemed to disappear, you know, kind of almost kind of vanish into you know, my neighbour's house. And it was almost as if she just walked through the walls. And anyway, I kind of like rubbed my eyes, and you know, just I didn't do anything. And after a while, I just went back to sleep. Next day, I asked my neighbour, is roughly the same age as me. I kind of asked him if he'd had any visitors that night.
Can you just take it again from there? Next day, I asked him.
Yeah, the next day I asked my neighbour, who's about the same age as me, I asked him if he had any visitors that night. I asked him whether one of his family members had come back late that night, and he said no. So I was quite baffled. And it was only then that it occurred to me that maybe I saw a ghost or something of that nature.
Brilliant.
Yeah?
Okay, so what's the next one about? Just remind me briefly, what's the next one?
Well, the next ghostly experience...
Yeah, just tell me briefly, what's this one?
Well, this is the one where I was like reading passages out of this book.
Okay, so you could start off by saying sort of like, I remember one night when I was young, da da da. Okay.
Yeah.
Alright then, when you're ready.
Yeah, I remember one night when I was young.
Can you just do that again, please? You went over a bit off the scale.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
I remember one night when I was young. I was about 14. It was a cold, a chilly night, and I didn't go out. I just decided to stay at home and, read a book. I happened to be reading a horror compendium. One of those, the Pan Book of Horror, volume, 7 or whatever. Anyway, I was sitting there all alone in my bedroom with the door shut, and everyone else was downstairs watching TV. Must have been about, 7:30, 7:45, sometime then. And I remember I started to read out passages aloud, from this book, and did this for a few minutes, and suddenly the lights started to go to flicker on and off, and I looked around and just slowly put the book down, and then just ran off downstairs, and I was quite spooked by it. And there's been other occasions in that same room where I've actually felt kind of a presence in the room, as if someone's been kind of watching me. And there's been occasions where I've kind of like just, I've awoke during the night, and I can honestly recall like someone actually like lying beside me, and kind of like, this has happened to me a few times, and every time it's happened, I've kind of said to myself, right, I'll count to 3, and then I'll try to grab this thing, right, and it's never worked. Whenever I turn around, this thing's gone, so I don't know.
Well, could you say something on the end like that, and it could have been my imagination, but as far as I was concerned, it was very real.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
I mean, you could argue that it, could have been my imagination, but it seemed pretty real at the time.
Yep. Okay. And then finally, your nun.
The nun. Yeah, the Valley Park nun ghost story. Eh?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Right. There's another little tale that I'd like to recall. This was when, I went to Valley Park lower school. There was an upper school and there was a lower school. Basically,
Could you start again by saying, I went to school in Wolverhampton?
Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah, I haven't mentioned Wolverhampton.
No. Just so people know where it is,
Yeah.
Yep. All right then.
Yeah, I went to school in Wolverhampton, and one of the, the schools that I went to was Valley Park lower school. There was also an higher, school which was more modernized than lower school. The lower school basically was an old Gothic type building, and it once it's kind of rumored that it was a nunnery before it was transformed into a school. And there was when I went to the school, there was all types of rumours circulating amongst the school kids that basically one of the nuns had thrown herself off at the tower at the top of the building, and had impaled herself on the railings below, and that every now and again, she could be seen, kind of just walking the kind of lonely corridors of this, school. And when I first, moved, to England from Pakistan, I moved here to England when I was 2 years of age. And from 2 to about 10, I actually lived in a street that sort of overlooked, this school, and we converted the attic into a bedroom, and I used to sleep in this bedroom, and I used to often look out during the night, out of my window, and I used to kind of see if I could spot this nun walking around, this old Gothic-y building, but I never did see her.
Were you disappointed?
Yeah, just a bit actually, I basically kind of every time, before I went to bed, I made a habit of looking out. I used to just stand there for a full, 10 minutes, basically just looking out, waiting to see this nun kind of,
Did she let you down?
walk by. Yeah, she did. She let me down.
You never saw her?
Nope.
Right, just say that again on the end.
What?
Fine. Never saw her. I was a bit disappointed, really, but there you go.
Yeah. Yeah, I never did see her, and I was a little disappointed, but, there you go.
Right, okay, that'll do us.
Well, we're rolling. Okay then, Sam, so tell us about your weird experience.
I can't.
Yes, you can.
I can't do it while I'm watching Eleanor making stupid fucking faces.
So we're rolling.
Right.
If you can.
Okay. Well, I remember it was about 3 years ago now, probably, and I was at my boyfriend's house, and it was a time where me and him were living together, and it was actually his parents' house, and because his parents were a bit old-fashioned, they wouldn't let us sleep together, but we slept in the same bedroom. And there was a single bed against either wall, and I was in one. I could hear the cat go.
So could I. Tiggy! 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 Shh!
The cat looks
Tell me
off.
she should. This is going to be another Pennine Lane, I can see it happening.
Noises in the middle here.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay, because I started laughing anyway. Okay. Do you want to start again, or do you want to pick it up where you left off?
I'll start it again.
Okay then.
Okay, right. Okay, it was a couple of years ago now, about 3 years ago, and I was living with my boyfriend in his parents' house. And because his parents are a bit old-fashioned, they wouldn't let us sleep together. They let us sleep in the same room, but we each had a single bed. Mine was on one wall, against one wall, and his was against the opposite wall. And we'd gone to bed, and it must have been, I think we'd been out somewhere, and it was probably about 2 a.m. that we'd gone to bed, so it was pitch black, completely dark, and his room is at the back of the house, and there isn't a lot of light because of the way the house is actually arranged, and the curtains didn't let any light in. I remember actually going to bed and trying to get to sleep and feeling sort of restless and a bit weird, and I opened my eyes and I realised that I couldn't see anything at all. And like usually you can see some, after a while, when your eyes get used to the darkness, you can make out shapes and forms of what else is in your bed, in your bedroom. No,
Right, I know you would have started this time.
Couldn't put the name in the sketch.
I thought Brookside was going to say me like I'm actually. But,
shit. I'm sorry, I'm nearly getting there. I'm nearly getting
okay.
there. Do you want me to start again?
No. Just carry on from.
Okay.
So you were asleep. That's all we got to. Is that you were asleep?
Yeah.
You were just dozing off.
I wasn't. I was trying to get to sleep, but all I could, like I say, I was trying to keep. No, I was. Hang on. Let me start again. Right. I was trying to get to sleep, but I realised. Stop it! She's making me worse. Get her! I tell you what.
It's him. I'm watching him. He's
right.
like,
you go and make us a cup of tea. You go and make us a cup of tea.
it's the dog. Every time I look at him, he's licking his bum, he's scratching, he's wagging his tail and moving about. And I'm like kicking up.
Fluff.
Oh God.
I think I'll throw him out back garden for a bit.
Yeah.
Oh no, it's raining into it.
Yeah, it is actually.
Well done.
Right, what?
That'll be his punishment. Okay.
Okay, right. So I was trying to get to sleep, and I remember opening my eyes and realising that I couldn't see anything. My eyes should have actually been accustomed to the dark, and but even after a couple of minutes, I couldn't see a thing, which freaked me out considerably, because usually after a while you can make out some sort of shapes and forms when your eyes do get used to the dark. But I just thought, well, that's nothing. Obviously the curtains are thick, or there's not a lot of moonlight out, or something like that. And I remember turning over and trying to get to sleep, and just as I'd settled down, I heard a voice right next to my ear, and it wasn't as though it was in my head. It wasn't something like the normal voices that you just imagine anyway. It was as if someone was stood by the bed, leant over me, and was speaking right next to my ear, and it was a very low voice, and it sounded like it was male, and it sounded like there were other voices underneath, as though suddenly someone had turned the television on or a radio, and there was a burst of noise, and there was one, like say the male, who could be heard over the top of a lot of murmuring and mumbling and stuff like that. And I couldn't make out anything that was being said, because it sounded like it was in a foreign language, and that was it. And I was petrified, completely petrified, and I jumped out of bed, ran into Mike's bed, and but wouldn't tell him what had happened, because I thought he'd just think I was mad. I just said I was a bit scared, and I just wanted to get in bed with him, basically. And so I didn't tell him anything at all about that incident for a good couple of years afterwards, when one day I was sat with a load of friends in a cafe, and we were all talking about weird experiences, and I just happened to say that, and Mike was there, he overheard me talking about it, and he said, oh, I've had that sort of experience in the same room, only I was alone, and I think it was in broad daylight. He was reading a book, there was nobody else in the house, and he heard someone say Mike, his name, a male voice, again, very low voice, speak his name right next to his ear. And there was absolutely no explanation for it whatsoever. Nobody else was in the room. Nobody else was in the house. And we still don't know what it was.
Which hearing certainly was it? Okay, we're rolling.
Okay. A friend of mine told me only a couple of months ago that he had a strange experience when he was young. And it was when he was about 4 years old, apparently. He was living down in Devon. And he and his family lived in a very old farmhouse. And apparently one night he was sent to bed with a temperature. He wasn't feeling very well at all. His mum had sent him to bed early. And during the night he got worse and worse. He couldn't sleep. And his throat hurt a lot. And he started really panicking, and he couldn't call for his mum because he lost his voice. And it was getting later and later, and like I say, he was getting more and more worried when the door to his bedroom opened and a woman walked in. And he didn't recognise this woman at all. He said it was a very old woman. And she walked over to him and sat on his bed. And she said, "Don't worry, I'm a friend of the family, and I've come to make sure that you're going to be okay." And he sort of calmed down, thinking that his mum had sent somebody up to see him. Maybe she was a nurse or a doctor or something like that. But she was very old, so he was a bit confused about it. Anyway, she said, "Right, I'm going to get you something, but don't worry, don't panic. You're going to be fine." She walked out of the room. 5 minutes later, she came back in carrying a big earthenware pot. The sort of pot that you get beer and cider in with a big cork stopper. And she poured some of this, whatever was in the pot, some liquid, into a cup and gave it to him. And she said, "Drink this and you'll be fine." And he drank it. He remembers putting the glass back down on the table next to his bed, lying back in bed. And then the next thing he remembered, he woke up in the morning and his mum was next to him. And he said, "Wow, who was that woman that you sent up last night? Because whatever it was that was in the pot really worked, and I feel a load better." I mean, he could talk, his throat had gone down, his temperature had gone down and everything. And his mum didn't know who he was talking about, and she said, "I've no idea, I didn't send anybody up, you must have been dreaming." And he said, "No, because there's her pot." And the pot was next to his bed on the floor, and his mum has no idea how it got there. He has no idea how it's got there, and apparently to this day he still keeps the pot.
Lovely. It's appeared. We're rolling.
Okay, so the story I've got to tell is about 5-6 years ago. I used to go to Napier University in Edinburgh, and I had to go between Glasgow and Edinburgh every day. So me and my sister bought this car. It was about 100 quid. We had no licence, no insurance, no road tax, no anything. So because we didn't have anything, we wanted to keep off the motorway. So we used to use a lot of wee tiny roads. There's loads of them between tiny little villages between Glasgow and Edinburgh. There's one stretch of road. It's really wild, and all there is this old church. And when you go through there during the daytime, it's quite spooky because you can see through the windows, it's stained glass windows at the front. You can see straight out through the back through the stained glass windows at the back. It sits on a bit of a hill, and you can see all the gravestones standing up. One night we'd gone out in Edinburgh, and it was about 1 o'clock in the morning. We were coming back. I was lying in the back seat because I was a bit drunk. My sister and a friend were in the front, and so she had to drive. Coming back down the road, going quite fast, radio blaring, we're all singing along. Next thing is, I sees this wee face at the window. It was like a little child hanging on at the outside of the car. Now I thought, it's my reflection at first, and I'm looking at it, and I'm thinking, am I a bit drunk here, yeah? So I thought, this is not right. So I sat up, got in the middle of the car, thought, I'll keep far away from it. It was hanging on. We were doing about 60, 70 miles an hour. My sister and my friend in the front seat, I says to them, "There's somebody looking in the back window." They two are going, "Don't scare us, don't tell us, we don't want to know." I'm saying, "Would you just look? I think it's my imagination. I think I've flipped here. Was somebody please look and back me up?" Two of them looked round, both of them saw it, and we just stepped on the gas. Away we went. It hung on for a couple of miles, and it was outside that old church with the old gravestones. Now, to this day, it'd be interesting to know if somebody got knocked down on that road, whether somebody had ran out and hit the side of a car. But it was hanging on for a good couple of miles.
Okay. We're rolling again.
Yeah, I've got loads of relatives, and I've got 27 first cousins, so I've got loads of aunts and uncles. Now, one of the things the women in the family used to do was get together for women's nights in. And one of the women in the family fancied herself as a bit of a medium. She thought, I can tell everybody's fortune. And this was a great giggle because she knew everybody. So she would say to my mother, you've got 5 kids. You know, you're going to have 5 kids. You're going to be surrounded by music, which is true. We all play musical instruments. Yeah, she knew us all, so she could tell you exactly what age you were, how many kids, how many girls, how many boys. So it was a big laugh. One of my aunts had recently married into the family. She'd married my mum's youngest brother. And my aunt was reading these tea leaves at the time, and she'd reading them through, and everybody was joking and laughing. She got to my Aunt Christine, and she said, I'm not going to read you a cup. Threw it down and smashed it. Now, this was on a Sunday evening, about midnight. She smashed the cup on the floor and left the room in a real panic, and she was quite an old woman, and she got up and left in quite a hurry. The other woman in the family says, oh, we're not talking to you. You have really upset her. My Aunt Christine's running crying, there's something wrong. I've not been accepted in the family. She saw something against me. She's really got it in for me. So all the rest of the women in the family wouldn't speak to this aunt because of what she'd done to this new member of the family. And it wasn't until about 6 months later that my mum being the psychiatric nurse, thought, I'll better get the family back together sort of thing, goes to speak to my aunt, says, what have you done? You've got that woman really scared. She thinks the family are against her. You don't want to know. She came out on this women's night out, you treated her really badly. You're still not speaking to her, and you still won't tell her. What on earth are you going to tell her? Yeah, it's a really evil thing to do. You've really hurt her. That's a bad thing to do. She says, I saw a wee black face. She says, hands up in the air. She says, I saw the devil in that cup. She says, I smashed that cup. So Mum thought, oh, where you go. That is out of it. You're completely out of it. Don't you ever dare tell anybody that. You've told me that, don't you tell me it. 4 months later, my Aunt Christine was diagnosed with cancer, which was very far gone. And she died a year later.
That's not actually the one I'd forgotten about. Okay, we're rolling again.
I think I'm completely nuts because I've got too many stories. Right, I rent my house out, and I had about 3 years ago I had a girl staying. She was a really good friend of mine, and she came to stay with me. She was staying for like a year when she was a student, and she always read the tarot cards, and she was into auras and saw people's auras. Like she'd say, oh, you're looking very purple today. She thought you were quite a happy mood, and you're looking a bit yellow today and a bit pink, yeah. And she was quite eccentric as well. And I've got a favourite armchair, and I always used to sit on it all the time. And she says, she says, there's a big orange cat. Now, I've got an orange cat, a little orange cat. There's a big orange cat sits next to you on that chair. And I'm saying, Tiggy, the cat I've got. No, she says, it's a huge big orange cat. Now, there's no way she knew when I was a child that I had a huge orange tomcat. And it was, like she says, it's like a tiger. She says it's like a wild cat. And it was a wild cat I had as a kid. And she's in this house, and it follows you about. She says, you go to the kitchen for tea, it's behind you. And there was no way she would have known that. She was a good friend, but she would not have known something 7-8 years before.
And the coffin handle? Oh
God, I've got a coffin handle in, but it's vanished. Did I tell you?
Okay, tell it from the top then.
Right, I was saying earlier I had lodgers, yeah. About 4.5 years ago, I had these 2 lodgers, and they did arts and leisure course at Salford University. And they got this summer job as grave diggers. And it was really controversial because they were digging up this really ancient graveyard that people in Manchester didn't want them to dig up. And they built all these high walls up round it. And what they were doing was removing coffins to put elsewhere. So it was all these banners, and they were getting like things thrown at them trying to go into it, and it was under police escort and things. And they said like a couple of times they'd got some coffins out that were lead coffins, people were frightened of worms and things, and body snatchers. And they'd also like tipped a couple of coffins over with somebody still in it, with like the shredded clothes, like the clothes and the hair still there as well. But they brought this coffin handle back, this really ancient brass coffin handle, and I've put it below the sink in the kitchen. This was about 4.5 years ago. I brought you a present back from our job, and I was talking to my boyfriend the other day about it, and I says, that coffin handle. I says, polish it up, it'll look good, I could do something with it. Can't find it, don't know where it is. And I never moved it from below the sink.
Whoa. Okay, I'm rolling. Okay.
Right. My dad's Lithuanian, and he's very national, and it's like a scout group that we used to always go to as children. And it's mixed scouts, it's boys and girls, it's Lithuanian scouts. And we used to always go to a camp in Altrincham, down south. And I was about 15, 16, and at the time you think, there's lads in the other camp. We had separate camps, but they were just through the woods from each other. So me and my sisters, there's 3 of us, The three sisters used to meet up with these four lads from the other camp. And we sneaked in all this illegal beer, which we weren't allowed to have. And we thought, all right, dead late at night, the adults don't know, we'll go down to an old rifle range. They do a crossbow shooting and archery practice. So we went down through the woods to meet these lads, and we're sitting a couple of hours, having a drink, having a laugh. And one of the lads, he was actually, his mother, he was half Lithuanian and half Mexican. His mother was Mexican. He says, I need to go for a pee. He says, I've too much drink, I'm going off for a pee. Back in a minute. We'd never thought of it. Another 7 of us sitting there, quite a thing, drinking. So about 10-15 minutes later, we're thinking, where is he? And my sister looked up, and he was sitting up on the rifle range table. But he had this huge big sombrero hat on. He looked for all the world like one of those cowboy movies where, the Mexican sits there with his head down, and all you can see is a sombrero, and he had his legs up on the table. And she says, oh, I tell you what, she says, we'll tie his laces together so that when he stands up, he'll fall off the table. So she goes over, puts her hand to his feet. Through his feet, he put his head up, and he just smiled at us. And the 7 of us all saw it. The other lad come back, and we ran off. We just ran screaming, thought, so was it a drunk, we all had this hallucination together? Was, mass hysteria, we imagined it, but the 7 of us kind of imagined it together. And the next day, in the cold light of day, we were saying we did see it, and every one of us saw exactly the same thing.
Experience happened to Mike, then I'm rolling.
Okay. Well, this experience happened to my boyfriend. It happened before I knew him, when he was... Oops, do you want me to start again?
Please, yeah. Thank you, Tiggy.
Okay, no, Tiggy, no,
Tiggy, get
down. There we go. She's going to come up again.
She's in she's the
I know. Go on. Bugger off.
Go on.
Up on the table, Tiggy.
Go away, Tiggy.
All you'd be able to hear on this tape is, go away, Tiggy. Go on.
She'll start purring loudly if you put her knee in.
Probably.
That's the problem, I was just thinking.
Well, I'm just going to start anyway, okay?
Yep.
Right. Okay, this experience happened to my boyfriend. It happened quite a while ago. It happened before I knew him, when he was about 16 years old. And he was on holiday with his family, his mum and dad and his sister, and they had a caravan in Anglesey. Now, he comes from North Wales anyway, and it was his, I think it was his dad's sister's caravan, something like that. Anyway, they were there for a week, and it was getting towards the end of I think it was the last day of the holiday, and they were all packing up to leave. And just before they actually hitched the caravan up to the car, him and his sister... oh no, I've done this wrong. Sorry, can I start again? Because I've just... Sorry about that.
Yeah, all right then. Okay.
Because I can remember how he told me. Hang on, let me just think about this.
We're rolling.
Okay, this actually happened to my boyfriend. It was quite a while ago. He was 16 at the time. He's 24 now, and it was when he was on holiday with his family. They had a caravan that they took to Anglesey. Him, his mum, his dad, and his sister. His sister's 2 years older than him, so she was 18 at the time. And it was the last day of the holiday, and they were packing to leave. Just before they packed everything away, Denise, Mike's sister, noticed that she'd about half an hour before, she'd put all her makeup and everything on top of this cupboard. Nobody had dropped the makeup bag. Nobody had touched it. Mike swears to this day that he had nothing to do with it. His parents obviously would have owned up if they had anything to do with it. But she had a mirror in her makeup bag, and there was a big damn.
This is take 2 and we're rolling.
Okay. This story actually happened to my boyfriend. It happened quite a few years ago when he was 18. He's 24 now. So work it out for yourselves, basically. He was on holiday with his family. His mum, his dad, and his sister Denise. His sister would have been 18 at the time. And they were on holiday in Anglesey in the caravan. Now, they come from North Wales anyway. So Anglesy's really just down the road for them. But anyway, it was the last day of the holiday, and they'd packed up, ready to leave. No, in fact, they had left. Sorry, mucked up again.
Okay, good. It's all right.
Right, shall I start again?
To say they'd left the holiday.
Okay, so it was the last day of the holiday, and they were leaving. And they'd hitched the caravan up, and they were driving down the dual carriageway back to Mould, where they lived. And on the way there, sort of halfway between Mould and Anglesey, they noticed, or Mike noticed, his auntie and uncle in their car driving in the opposite direction. And he mentioned this to his parents, and they thought it was a bit strange because their relations all live in Mould, and they couldn't understand why they were driving to Anglesey. So they pulled the caravan over into a lay-by to see if the car would actually turn round and come back to follow them, which it did. And the auntie and uncle came out of the car, and they had some bad news because Denise at the time was actually engaged to a guy from Wrexham, just down the road from Mould, and he'd had an accident that day, and he'd been killed in a car crash, which was bad enough news. You can.
Fluff! Sit still.
Fluff! Oi! Put that in the kitchen.
Fluff, come on.
Okay.
So they noticed the aunt and uncle driving down the dual carriageway in the opposite direction, and they thought this was strange because they knew that their relations had they knew they lived in Mould, and they didn't have any real reason to go over to Anglesey. So they pulled off in the lay-by to see if the car carrying the auntie and uncle would turn round and come back, which it did. And unfortunately, they brought bad news with them because Denise, Mike's sister, at the time was seeing a guy, and he had actually been in an accident that day, and he'd been killed. And so they drove back home. Obviously, Denise was in hysterics and everything. They got back home, and Mike remembered vividly being told that the boy, Denise's boyfriend, had been hit by the car at round about 11 o'clock that morning, and he died instantly. And Mike looked at the clock in the kitchen, which they always keep wound up all the time, and it had stopped at 11 o'clock, dead on. And another strange thing that had happened was that just before they were packing to go, Denise had a mirror that was in her makeup case, which she had put on top of one of the cupboards in the caravan. And when they came to unpack everything, the case was, the makeup box was still intact. Nobody had touched it. Nobody had knocked it off the shelf. Nobody had even handled the mirror. And yet, all the way down it, there was a crack. And it was quite strange and disturbing. Right.
Okay, rolling. Take 500.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
I must admit, I messed up well. So.
Pardon me for being rude. It was not me. It was my food. It just came up to say hello, and now it's going down below.
If I ever need a sound effect, I can use that one.
Yeah. What's that thing Madonna says? No, anyway.
Okay then.
Madonna says.
Well, she has the poem about farts, doesn't she?
I'm rolling, by the way.
Oh shit!
So they
my
got
God,
back.
I was possessed just then by.
You were, I think, yeah. There's something strange in this house.
Tired. Okay, they got back home, and they started to unpack the caravan, and one of the things they noticed was in Denise's makeup box that she'd had with her all day, all the time that they'd been on holiday, in fact. Nobody had touched it apart from Denise Nobody had knocked it to the floor. Nobody had done anything to it. Inside it was a mirror, which had cracked from top to bottom. And when they finally got into the house, they noticed that the kitchen clock had stopped dead on 11 o'clock, which was exactly the time that her boyfriend was killed that day.
Yep, fine.
That's much better.
Okay, well, I'm rolling.
This happened about 4 years ago, and it was like a student party. And for a student party, you usually go after the pub. So it was about 12:30, 1 o'clock, and it was in Lower Broughton, Salford, and it was on the cliff. There was quite a few student houses at the time on the cliff, and we were invited up to this party. We were wandering along the road, me and my sister, and we saw this woman coming the opposite way. And what was weird about it was we were looking at it, and it was pitch black, and there's only about 2 or 3 street lamps on that road. It's very overgrown with trees, and we were actually watching it because she was an old woman with white hair, but she was dressed like a student, or what we thought looked like a student. She had a long black frock on her, and students wear black. We were looking at this old face in student clothes with like button boots on, little black button boots, and I thought, student dressed, what's she doing? She come round the corner, and just come round the corner, she sort of wandered into the wall, and she wasn't there. So we thought, she's gone in the side gate, she's gone down an alleyway, and we just wandered on up. And as we got to the spot where she wasn't there anymore, there was nothing there. It was a complete wall. So we just ran. The two of us just ran. We didn't say anything. We just ran, and we ran all the way till we got to the party. And it was the weirdest, because she was so real, she was solid, and it was like an old student had just gone in a gate of the back of a house.
Could you just say at the end there that she'd gone through a wall?
Yeah.
Okay.
As,
you ran off to the party.
Yeah, the weirdest thing about it was she was solid. She walked off left as we were coming towards her, and I assumed she's gone in a gate to the back of a house. She's gone down a side street. We walked on up, didn't think anything of it because this woman was solid, looked perfectly alive to us. Wandered up the road. There's nothing there. She'd gone. We thought, where's she gone? Nothing. Just a complete wall. We just ran.
Yep. All right then. And
you've never told me that before.
No,
That's
Cliff
weird.
Crescent up to Andy Davis's party.
And the one where your mother had seen her father in the spiral staircase.
Oh, aye, yeah. That's another weird one.
Okay, rolling.
My dad was telling us the next day. He woke up one middle of the one night, and the reason he woke up was my mum was walking round at the bottom of the bed in a circle, and her eyes were shut and she was asleep, and she was walking around in a circle. And Dad says that she was actually like her feet were moving as if she was going up steps, and she was walking round and round and round. And my dad got out of bed and he thought something really wrong here. She's sleepwalking. Something's disturbing her. And as he went towards her, she slumped against the dresser and put her hand up in the air as if reaching out to something. And Dad grabbed her and woke her up. And she goes, leave me, I'm going to my dad, I've seen my dad. Her dad, she said, she's telling my dad, that her dad was walking round in a spiral staircase and he was going up towards the roof. And her dad used to work as a railway worker, and he always wore like Doc Marten heavy boots. And he had them in his shoelaces over his shoulder, and he was walking in his socks. And she says, he's not at work, he's here, I can talk to him, he's not busy. And she was following him. She says, I was following him round the stairs. He wouldn't let me come. She says, he said, I'm all right. You stay there. You stay where you are. And she was leaning out to him and she wanted to go with her dad. And my dad woke her as she was going to go with her dad.
And was it your mother as well that saw a ghost of a little girl?
Yeah, Mum sees a wee girl as well.
Okay, I'm rolling.
My mum used to work night shift. So I was always like the mother of the house, and I did the meals because my dad was supposed to be doing it, but he was always asleep on the couch. And for breakfast, well, my mum was getting up to go on night shift. That would be her breakfast. She always got things like pork chops and chips, for her breakfast. So I used to carry it in. I was about 12, 13. And I used to carry it in, and so many times my mum would be talking. She'd be asleep, lying in her bed, and she'd be talking. And she wasn't obviously not talking to another adult. She was talking to a kid. Yeah, and she had a hand out as if she was holding the hand of somebody next to bed. She had a hand clasped on the end of the bed. And this happened, I saw it about 4 or 5 times. And she was talking away, and I'd go, Mum, wake up, your breakfast's here. And she'd go, Alan, I'm talking to this, do you not see her, the wee girl? Now, she gave her a name, I can't remember what her name was, and she'd say, I'm talking to so-and-so. And she knew her name. And I go, Mum, you're dreaming, you're not awake yet. And Mum's going, she's there, I'm talking to her, don't be so rude. Yeah? And I remember talking to her afterwards, and I said to her, Mum, who are you talking to? She says, oh, there's a wee girl comes to see me. She says, every night, just before I wake up, this wee girl. She says, do you not see her? She says, she's only about 5 or 6. She wears a white polo neck jumper and a little tartan plaid skirt. And Mum says, I see her all the time and I talk to her. You know, she's only little, she's only young, and you scare her and you get in the way when I'm trying to talk to her. And don't, she says, stand back, wait for a minute until she's all right, till she goes away, then I'll have my breakfast.
So how did that make you feel?
I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything at all. I just saw Mum look like she was holding somebody's hand, eyes shut, and talking to a little girl or a little kid. Not much else I can say, really.
Right, okay.
That is so weird. Yeah.
But she did it all the time, and it was always the same wee girl she saw, and she was always wearing the same clothes. And Mum used to say to me she was awake. You know, yeah, the wee girl.
That's bizarre.
What about, I don't really know how you can... I don't think you told Sam that one there. I'm rolling.
My mum's a psychiatric nurse, and she works with mental patients in a hospital in Glasgow.
Okay.
Right, my mum works as a psychiatric nurse, and she used to do nights. And I remember her telling me that she has a lot of geriatric patients, you know, in the mental hospital she works in Glasgow. And she says that during the day, you know they're going to die because you can see death in their face. Now, she says that maybe only because she's trained in it as a nurse that you can see they're going to die. And she says they do things like they give away things. They know themselves they're going to die. They'll say, you can have my television, you can have my book, this is yours. Yeah? And she says, you constantly say to them, oh, don't be so silly, you know, you're not. She says, but you can see it in their face. She says, the face loses all life. And she says, it's not something you can say to somebody that doesn't know. You can't say to them, they didn't look alive. But she says, they look a bit grey, they look a bit drawn. And she says, you can see death in their face. It's the only way she can describe it. She says, and the other nurses say, I don't like anybody to die on their own. So that person's going to die tonight. I want somebody to sit with them. And they always send a nurse in to sit in the room with them. And at a couple of seconds before they die, and you know they're going to die, they sit up in bed and they lean out towards something at the bottom of the bed. And Mum says you always grab their hand because you think they're leaning out to somebody that's alive, you know, to save them. They're a bit frightened, they're a bit upset, you know, they don't know what's happening to them, they know they're dying, but you know, they want somebody to comfort them. She says, but they throw you off. If you grab their hand, they don't want you, and they lean out past you and they're not wanting you at all. And Mum says that all of the people she's seen die have done that. It's like they're leaning out towards something else that's there, something else that's calling them, not the person next to them, and they're oblivious to you.
Go over it. Okay, I'm rolling.
Right, I was saying earlier that my mum is a psychiatric nurse. One night she had 2 women and twin girls brought into the hospital completely off their head. And what happened was the 4 of them were playing with a Ouija board, and whatever they contacted sent the 4 of them off of it. One of the girls, the two women were just very violent, completely hysterical. They had to be restrained and, you know, and committed to the mental hospital. And I think they're still there now. That was like 10-15 years ago. The twin girls, one of them lies in a bed all the time, and all she says, her mouth doesn't open, and the nurses are frightened to sit with her, and all she says is, help me, in this little tiny voice, and her mouth doesn't open, and every one of the nurses is terrified of her. Yeah, and she just lies there, paralysed, and she's fed through like a drip, because she can't move. The other twin goes about the hospital on all 4s, galloping and screaming like something's after her. And whatever the 4 of them contacted, it sent the 4 of them off their head, and they were playing with the Ouija board.
Yeah,
That's horrible.
Yeah. Because my mum came in and says, don't any of you dare play with it.
Why?
Yeah.
Because I'm scared.
Mum came in and says, don't any of you dare touch a Ouija board. That night she came into the hospital.
Because I used to mess around with Ouija boards the last time I was in college.
Yeah, cheers. Rolling.
When I was a kid, trying to get to sleep, I used to be lying in my bed. My bed's like, the bedroom at home is like 27 feet long, and I share it with my sister. And she sleeps at one end of it and I sleep at the other end, so we're quite a distance apart. And there is walled units in. So my headboard of my bed where I sleep is in like sort of an alcove. And I used to hear breathing, like somebody sleeping next to me in the bed, and it was a single bed. And as a kid I'd hear this breathing, I thought somebody's sleeping there, and I'd get a bit frightened. So I would speed my breathing up, to see if the breathing was still the same, and the breathing was always the same, quite slow, somebody sleeping. I would actually hold my breath thinking, well, it's maybe a bit of an air or a bit of me moving in the bed creaking, it could be that. And I heard it for years and years and years. I remember telling my sister once, and she just didn't want to know and was really scared and was like telling me off for scaring her. But I got used to it because it was there for years and years. And I never thought in really of it until I moved out of home. And I was sleeping in another bed and I thought, there's no breathing in this bed here, so it's something about that bed at home, or where it's situated. And I remember one night I really frightened my sister because I got up out of bed and I must have been semi-asleep, went all the way across the room and climbed into bed with her and said to her, I can't sleep there, the breathing's keeping me awake. Yeah, and we were two of us really scared. I remember crying, like we two of us crying, cuddled up crying in the bed. And it wasn't until I went back home again at Christmas, this was I haven't been home in about 4 or 5 years, went home, sleeping in that bed and the breathing's still there.
You didn't actually tell us about the boat.
What boat?
I can't remember.
The one with the waves in the boat?
Yeah, the chicken box story.
Oh, chicken box. I don't think that's really...
Well, I do, because I think that fits in with my dad and the Auric, as I say.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get enough that I can then put them together and slowly go into something else rather than a sudden change, you see. So, yeah.
Well, Mum as a child used to live between Ireland and Glasgow, and used to spend 6 months in Ireland in the summer working on the farm with the grandparents and 6 months at school in Glasgow. Now, Mum was really little. Mum's one of 6, and she remembers vividly on a fishing boat. It was always fishing boats they took, and she remembers on a fishing boat sitting out on the deck with the waves coming about 6 feet over the boat and being really, really scared. She was only about 2 or 3 because her younger brother was only an infant, and her mother had the baby in the arms, and she was praying. And she tied them all together, and Mum remembers the men taking the lifeboats out, shouting women and children first, and that's why they were all sitting up on the deck. And my gran says to her, there's no way you can remember that. And Mum says, I can't, I was that scared. So they went back to Glasgow, they got there okay, the storm had abated and the ship was alright. On the way back, on the following year, when they're back in Ireland again, heading back towards Glasgow, the boat they were due to get, they were all packed up ready to go. The following morning they woke up and the baby had caught chicken pox and they couldn't go on that boat. And the boat went down on the way over.
Right, fine.
Really weird this.
Right,
when I was a student, I lived in student digs in Lower Broughton, in Salford again. And there was quite a couple of weird things happening in that house. There was my sister, myself and another lad, and he slept in the bedroom downstairs. Now, one morning he came in and he was really wild looking eyes, and he said, somebody was in the house last night. I'm like, nobody was in the house. He said, yeah there was. He says, there was a bloke sitting on the bottom of my bed. And I'm thinking, I don't want to hear this, it's breakfast time, you're scaring me, right? And this house wasn't particularly safe anyway. You know, it was a bit of a dodgy area, and I thought somebody's got in, there's been a burglar, right? He says, no, he says, there was this man sitting on the bottom of my bed with a paper bag on his head. Yeah? And I says, Neil, weren't you scared? Why didn't you shout? He says he wasn't doing anything. He was just sitting at the bottom of my bed, sort of just sitting there, not even speaking. And I says to Neil, you should have said something, that could have been anybody, yeah? Paper bag on the head. He says the weird thing was, he says, he got off the end of my bed, he says, and sat on a white plastic chair next to my bed. Now, we had white plastic chairs in the living room, and we had 3 of them. There was only 3 of us in the house, and that was a breakfast table. And I was going, don't tell me you're scaring me. I don't want, this is a scary house as it is. I don't want to be told anything like this. In to have breakfast, there was only 2 white plastic chairs at the living room table, and there was one in Neil's bedroom. Now, there was no way that he'd taken that chair into his bedroom, and that's where the man in the paper bag was sitting on that chair.
Okay.
In the same house, my sister had the big room at the front of the house, and she had a really restless night, and she says to me in the morning, oh God, she's had a really bad time. She said, just like all the way through my sleep, I couldn't sleep, and I thought, what's wrong with you? She goes, oh, the air in that room's not very good. It's a pretty damp house, I don't feel very well. So anyway, we'd gone out and we phoned a friend from Scotland, and the friend says, were you out last night? And Claire says, no. She said, I don't feel very well, I had a bad night. She says, I had this dream about you. She says, you were dancing. And Claire says, I was dancing. She says, yeah. She says, you were in my bedroom. She says, I saw you. You were dancing. She described to Claire exactly what she'd on before she went to bed that night. She says, she had red leggings on, a little white spotty dress, and she says, this is what you were wearing, and it really freaked Claire out. That was exactly what she was wearing, and Claire had a bad sleep, felt really sort of hyper and up emotional, and a friend says, "Oh, I saw you in a dream." And the final scary bit was, she said, and she actually described the bedroom to Claire where she was dancing, and she'd never been in the house. She was from Scotland.
Can you do that again, please?
No.
Okay, I'm rolling.
Okay. This happened to me when I was actually it's a recurring thing that's happened to me a few times now. It's a bit like a nightmare. It's a bit like just a weird feeling that I keep having that comes and goes. The first time I experienced it, I think it was a dream. I think I was asleep at the time. It was when I was living in North Wales in a place called Blaen y Ffestiniog. And the house that I lived in anyway was quite strange. It was an old chapel house. And there was a few weird things that used to happen, noises that we'd hear, and the kids, there was two small kids there that used to say they could see things, see people, and one of them always used to say you could see a spaceman. But of course kids have a very vivid imagination, so you never can tell. Anyway, it was a house, it had 9 bedrooms, and I used to stay in bedroom number 3, which was the weirdest bedroom of all, because that's where everybody heard most of the weird noises that were going on, which happened at night. Anyway, one night I was in there, I was in the bed, and I was sleeping. My boyfriend Mike was next to me in the bed, and it had been a late night. It was about 3 a.m, and I was trying to get to sleep. And it was around about the time when when you're trying to get to sleep, you sort of drift off. You can feel yourself sort of floating, drifting into sleep. And you're never very sure of whether what goes on then is real or whether it's imagined or, dreamt. But I felt as though I was surrounded by overpowering evil. That's the only way I could describe it. It was a sense of everything around me was just completely and utterly evil. It was the most frightening thing I've ever experienced in my life. I was terrified because I couldn't move at all. I couldn't scream for help. I couldn't see anybody else in the room. I wasn't aware of anything else other than complete and utter evil. And I can't actually tell you how long it lasted, because I think I did fall asleep eventually, and I only remembered it when I woke up the next morning. That was the first time I experienced it. The second time I experienced it was in the same house. This time it was in the nursery, which was at the top of the house. There was 3 floors to the house and the cellar underneath. The nursery, like I say, was at the very top room, and I'd made that into my dark room. I was one day, it was I think it was only about 6 o'clock in the evening. I was doing some printing in the dark room. Obviously all the lights were off apart from the red safe light, and I remember I just printed something up and I was transferring the print into the developer, and as I stood over the developer I was looking at the print forming in the developer, when again all of a sudden all I could feel, everything else was blotted out. It was as though I couldn't hear, see or feel anything else other than evil. Like something had just passed through me. Like, I know it sounds strange to talk about spirits or possession or anything like that, but that's the closest I've ever come to feeling as though I was possessed by something. It must have lasted for only a few seconds, because I was actually awake at the time and I could judge time a lot better. And also because I remember the print, when the print was first put into the developer, was when I began to feel the sensation. And it takes around about a minute for the developer to work properly and the print to fully come up. And when that moment had passed, the
the image on the print had only just emerged. So that must have been about, I don't know, 60 seconds, maybe less. And it has recurred a few times since then in different places, different houses. But all I can really remember from it is feeling complete and utter evil. There was another time when I had a strange dream as well, and I felt as though I don't know whether I was awake or whether it was a dream. All I can say is that I thought I had my eyes open. I could see my bedroom. I could see the light shining in from the next room. I was aware of what was going on. When I closed my eyes, it was as though I was going into a dream, but rather than waking up and then falling back to sleep and dreaming another dream as what usually happens, I would close my eyes and instantly the dream or whatever it was would start where it left off when I opened my eyes again. It was incredibly vivid, more vivid than any dream I've ever had, because a lot of the time dreams are you recognise places and faces, but they don't actually look like who they are meant to be or where they're meant to be. But you just know that you're dreaming of that person, even if it doesn't look like them. But in this dream, everything looked how it was in real life. Everybody looked as they normally do in real life. And as I say, it was so vivid. And another thing that happened that same night was when I did wake up, it was as though I was fighting to regain consciousness, but I couldn't move. My arms and legs and my head were completely paralysed. And another thing I remember was feeling as though the duvet was being pulled off the bed, as though someone was at the foot of the bed. I couldn't see them, but as though someone was at the foot of the bed, pulling the duvet off me further and further, pulling it down. And I was completely powerless to stop it. And this went on for hours because I could see the clock at the foot of my bed. And even though I was paralysed, I could still actually see things. And every time I opened my eyes, it was 1:30 the hour for about 5 hours. The first time it happened, it was 1:30. The last time it happened, I remember it being 5:30. And I looked at the clock at the same time, at 1:30 the hour, every hour, from 1:30 till 5:30.
I'm conscious actually. I've got far more women than men actually, and right. So.
Did you get Andy?
Yeah, oh yes, that's right. I haven't got Andy's yet, have I? Yeah. I've had quite a few sort of weird experiences, sort of, especially when I've been ill. Remember there was once when I was about 7 years old. Because I mean, when you're ill, your mind doesn't sort of work properly, does it? It's sort of almost like weird sort of images come into your head, which make perfect sense when you're kind of either just like floating off to sleep when you're ill, or you're sort of semi-conscious. And then when you sort of come to, you try to make sense of it all, and it just doesn't make sense at all. I also remember once when I was about 7 years old, and I'd had a fan on me. And it had a kind of a spirally sort of shape in the middle, or kind of like lots of ever decreasing circles in the centre printed on it. And I remember actually sort of raising my hand, although I wasn't really completely in control of myself. It almost felt like somebody else was doing it. Taking my hand and actually pointing and putting it in the middle of the circle towards this fan, and Mum sort of came in and stopped me because she was worried, like, sort of go and put my hand in the actual fan, even though there was like a safety wire around it. But that was quite strange. And another time I remember I'd been ill, I think, a day or two before, in my house where I'm away from home, up in Salford, where I was studying, and I was under sort of a bit of stress at the time, I think, because there were a few projects and stuff that were, needed to get done. And I remember waking up but I was waking up so slowly, as if something was trying to stop me from waking up. And I was almost aware that there was somebody else in the room, but I don't know. My dressing gown was hanging up, which was quite dark, a dark colour against a white door. So perhaps it was that I actually kind of saw, although I wasn't conscious of this until I actually sort of woke up the next morning. But as I was sort of coming to, as your eyes sort of blur, I was conscious that the shelf that is in front of my bed with a load of videotapes on it was kind of like moving up and down. And I was trying to force myself to wake up to actually see if the shelf was actually moving or not. And I then, when I did actually wake up, I looked at this shelf for about a minute before I could take my eyes off it to try to convince myself that the shelf was not moving and it was just my imagination. That was absolutely weird.
Okay, so this is Cassie's exciting story number 2.
Story number 2, I can't remember the first one.
Neither can I.
Right.
Okay, so what's this weird experience then?
It's not so much a weird experience, it's more just a really bad coincidence. A few years ago, I was in college in a lesson, and we were talking about the news on television, about what stories make the news, and what was in the headlines at that particular day. And there was nothing much, so I said, jokingly, I must tell you this was a joke, to the person sat next to me, what we need is a good plane crash. This was on a Monday afternoon, the last lesson, and would you know it, the day after the Tuesday, a plane went and dropped out the sky over Amsterdam. I don't know if you remember the incident, but I've never forgot that, and I just think that I'm somehow responsible for it, and I feel awful.
This is Rob's weird experience, and I'm rolling. So, what is your weird experience, Rob?
Stop it. I'm going to try.
Okay, we're rolling.
Right. I had an exam the following day, so I decided I'll start again. I had an exam the next day. So one day I decided, right, I'm going to do some meditation, see if I can get my head around the stuff what I need to know. So I sat down with my legs crossed and my hands on my knees. I didn't do all the crappy little home, all that stuff. I just sat there. I had some nice peaceful music in the background, and I just relaxed and thought all the thoughts that you're supposed to think and whatever. And something clicked, right? And it was just whoa, what's happening? And I felt myself rising. And it was a bit scary, because I wasn't sure, nothing like this had happened before. And I actually felt myself move out of my body. Right? Now, this was getting really freaky for me, because I hadn't intended for this. I thought it was just going to be nice and peaceful, relaxing. But I looked at myself, and I looked at myself, and I was sat there, with my legs crossed and my hands on my knees. And so I thought, whoa, might as well make the most of it whilst I can. So I went into other rooms, and I actually went into a room where my parents were watching TV. I actually watched a bit of, I think, the Coronation Street on at the time. Then it came into my mind the fact that, can I get out of this? So a bit of panic started, and I went back, and it was just fine. I just went straight back into my body and woke up, and it was about 3 hours later. So that was quite freaky for me.
Were you actually floating?
No, I floated out of my body, but once I was out of my body, I was still stood on the ground, and I was actually I walked into the room. Didn't need to open doors. I just walked through the doors. But I saw my feet seemed to stay on the ground.
Have you tried it since?
Not to that extent. I do it peacefully to keep my mind relaxed, but I might do one day, but I don't know. That was a bit too much. I was still a bit young and naive about the things, and I shit myself up basically.
Right. So can you say something like, I have. You've attempted it since, or whatever, or I might do again, but something like that.
Huh?
Just as a final thing to say,
no.
if I have another major examination due, I probably will have another go at it, because after I did do it, I had a very nice peace of mind and I was very relaxed, and I actually did pass the examination quite well the next day. So if I ever get to a situation like that, yeah, I will do it again, because it was cool.
Right, okay, thanks very much. Anyway, right. Well, okay, I'm rolling.
Okay. Me and my girlfriend were in a car, and we had driven up to this point that was like well known in Leeds for where everybody went over and had a bit of fun. And it's like we were just like having a bit of fun, as it were. And I think I went a bit too far, and it's like she got out of the car and she walked off. Now I was gonna follow her, but she was a stroppy cow, so I thought I'd leave her where she is. So she walked off, and I just like stayed there. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning, so she could have got killed. I don't know. I don't care. I haven't seen her since. Anyway, so I was just like sat there in the car listening to the radio, and I saw like this blue flashing light in front of me, over in the sky or whatever, and it was like I don't know. It was like an asteroid or something like that, but it was much slower in hitting the ground. So it's like it looked as if it had landed in a field nearby. So I thought, no, why not? The worst I can do is get killed. So I went down, and it was like just as I crossed over the hill, this huge.
I won't be up.
This huge, giant, fuck off spacecraft was there waiting for me, and I looked at it and thought, oh shit, what the fuck's happening? And the little doors opened, right? And this fucking 7-foot guy, skinny as all, you've never seen anything like it, right? He walked out and he goes, which I'd learned a bit of Martian, so I had the gist of what he were on about. So he guided me onto his spacecraft, right? I was now thinking maybe I should have gone after my girlfriend, because it would have been a bit safer. So I got onto the spacecraft, and I felt like sudden vibrations underneath my feet, and it's like as they talked, right, there was like a little black bar underneath them where subtitles came up, right, and it came out in the English translations which I could understand, and they started telling me that they were from Zephod 9, right, which translated is Zephod 9, right. And there was like they needed a human to experiment on, so they experimented on me, and it's like we're amazed at the size of my penis and other creative, artistic integrities such as that. And they just like I was there for about 5 hours. It felt like that anyway. They were doing special tests like ripping my skin apart just to see if it hurt, and taking my eyeballs out to see if I could see. And this lasted for about 5 hours, as I said. And they says, right, we're sick of you now, and they threw me out, and I had a bit of a fall, as you do from a spacecraft that's flying across the sky, and I woke up and I was in my car, and I walked off.
You walked off in your car?
Yeah, I walked away from the car because I didn't feel in a state of mind to drive away.
Okay, this is Martin Ruston.
Certainly is.
What was your weird experience?
When I was around about 6 years old, I was lying in bed asleep at night. Everybody else was in bed, and I used to sleep with the door open in the bedroom. And in the hallway, through the door, I could see this shadow, which looked like a figure shadow, and it was pretty scary. I mean, it wasn't as if it was anything still that could have been creating that shadow, because it was moving, and I'm pretty sure it was a shadow of a person. And I did what most kids did at the age of 6, and that's go running into my parents' bedroom, and I ended up sleeping in their bedroom for the rest of the night, and their door was open, and I woke up in the middle of the night again, and there it was again on the wall, walking across, and it was really scary. And I woke my mum and dad up again, and they said, well, it must be your dad getting up for work, and this is about 4:30 in the morning. Although he did get up early for work, but I thought, just a minute, he's sat at the side of it, he's laid down at the side of me, so it can't be my dad. and he put the light on, and everything went, and I never saw it again. So whether it was being a child that made me see that shadow, I don't know, but it was pretty scary at the time.
Brilliant.
Is that true?
All right, I'm rolling.
Right, at the age of about 15 or 16, I was with some friends at a local snooker club, and we'd left, and up in the sky somebody noticed 5 bright green lights further ahead of the clouds, so it couldn't have been any lights coming from, we thought, couldn't have been any lights coming from the ground, because they weren't hitting the clouds, they were through the clouds, if you see what I mean. And we were watching these lights, and they were jumping around for about half an hour. And anyway, a friend that could drive took us into town, and we followed these lights, and it turned out to be an opening for a nightclub. But how the ray from the lights did not hit the clouds, we don't know.
Okay.
We thought they were aliens, but it turned out to be an opening for a new nightclub.
Did you laugh?
Did we laugh? We just travelled off. We just travelled about 8 miles just to find out what these lights were, just to find out they were they were nothing at all. But it was fun, yeah.
Okay, right.
Okay.
Okay, I'm rolling, Billy. So, what's your experience then?
Okay, I used to know a lad who we used to go to school with. He was a year above us, and we used to catch the bus with him and things, but he used to live at the end of our road. Now, I've got a bedroom, we've got a main road, and I've got a bedroom at the front of the road, so whenever I go in the bedroom, I always close the curtains. And one night, I was getting ready to go out, and I closed the curtains, put the lights on, put my music on, but I just had this feeling to look out the window, and I'm nosy anyway, and if I ever hear anything, I always just twitch through the curtains and have a look. And this time, I stood up, and just from the corner of the curtain, I just had a look out. And as I looked out, I saw this lad, Paul, walking down the street. But as I looked, he was staring right at me, as if he was looking at me before I even looked out of the curtains. I just thought it was a bit strange and a bit spooked, so I just quickly closed the curtains. And then the next day, I found out that he'd committed suicide around that time.
That's your fault. You did it. You did it.
Perhaps that was him.
Yeah. I'll just take it from the next day I found out.
So I quickly closed the curtains, and I was just... so anyway, the next day, I found out that he committed suicide around that time, which was very spooky, really.
Right.
Okay, I recently finished a project which I did, which was a magazine item, and it was different people's experiences on spirits and ghosts.
You have to explain it's on video or something like that.
Right, okay. I've just recently finished a video project, which was some interviews that I collated with different people who had different experiences with ghosts and spirits. One in particular lady was telling us a story about her own experience, but she also kept on mentioning, she was a landlady of a pub, and she kept on mentioning this guy who kept on appearing every so often, and he'd sit down or he'd stand against the bar and he'd watch her, and she thought that he was just maybe an old landlord or somebody who'd already lived there who died years ago, because she said he was old-fashioned looking. And after we finished the interview with her, we all had a few drinks and we were stood against the bar and we were all laughing about this guy, like the cameraman kept on turning around saying, "Go, you can serve him as well, and who's he messing about?" But nobody saw anything. And then she was laughing, and then all of a sudden she turned around and she just looked to the side of him, and she just said, "He's there, I can see him, he's just stood right next to you now." And everybody stopped talking and just looked. We couldn't see anything, but she just walked slowly out of the bar, and she stood in the middle of the room just staring into this space. And then she just sat down and looked at him and then just said he disappeared. She said he just appeared while we were stood there and then just disappeared, that was scary, that was.
All right, rolling.
Another lady I interviewed, who was a psychic, and she does psychic shows, and she's a medium, so she gets in contact with people on the other side. And there was 3 of us who went to interview. There was a camera, sound, and me, and I sat there asking the questions. And she kept on saying that there was a lady present and a gentleman, and she said the lady
seems to be quite close to one of us. They've come to see one of us, but she couldn't work out who. She said she was quite plump and very loving or whatever, so she thinks it probably was one of our relatives, but we wouldn't know. And there was a gentleman who she couldn't really quite describe what he looked like because it wasn't coming through strong enough. But as she gave me a reading, an aura reading, and she did say something to me, and she turned around and said that this fella had contradicted what she'd just said, that it was all wrong and I wasn't how she said I was, which was quite strange.
Do you think they were there, this one, the spirit like had come to see one of you, had they come because, to get through her?
I think so. She says that they get in contact with her because some people can actually feel it or see it or whatever, have these clairvoyant, and they would have known that we were there, and they would have probably tried to get in contact with her. But she said every so often she tries to turn it off as much as she can, but it will sort of like pop in. She said like an experience she has is like in the bank, and her mind's wandering, that's when it happens, and she's not really thinking of anything, and suddenly she'll...
As well as the grey lady that used to appear on my bed that I used to tell my mum, that I don't remember much myself. There were several other strange things that happened while I lived in this small cottage in Norfolk. One of the things being was... one of those things was this nightmare, I suppose you could call it. I think it only happened once. I was dreaming, I suppose, face down against a pillow, and all of a sudden this disembodied head appeared before me. It was a man's head, quite large. In actual fact, it was more of the size of and shape of a pumpkin, a large pumpkin. He had black hair, and basically was lit. The background was dark, so that it just seemed that his head was floating. Now, he was saying something. I don't know whether he actually spoke words. It was almost like he was a demon. He spoke with sort of like a demon tongue. And I got the gist of what he was saying. The only way I can describe it was that he was slagging off my mother. And that frightened me very, very much. I was 4 years old. I ran down the stairs, and I remember meeting my mother at the bottom of the stairs, and she said, what's wrong? And there's no way that I could have possibly begun to explain to her what I had seen and heard. Now, I don't know how I could have possibly come up with that. I don't think I could have seen anything on the television which would have suggested that to me. I did have a vivid imagination when I was young, but even so, at 4 years old, I think that's very, very strange, to put that down just to imagination. We'll just start the intro again there. When I was 4 years old, I lived in a cottage in Norfolk. Start again. When I was 4 years old, I lived in a cottage in Norfolk, and it was a bit spooky at times. One of the things I remember quite vividly still was this nightmare. This was a dream I'd had, which I suppose you could describe as a premonition. I'd had a few of these at the time, whereby I dreamed something, and 3 days later, something to do with it seemed to happen. Now, in this dream, I remember this little chap, which I didn't know very well. I knew his cousin. He'd had something wrong with one of his eyes. It had, like, whited over or sort of flipped over or something. I remember having to carry him because he couldn't see where he was going through school to get to the ambulance that was waiting out the front. Now, 3 days later, this boy's cousin and another chap were sitting in a maths lesson, and they were aggravating me, basically. They were saying sort of things about me and that I could hear. At the end of the lesson, I picked up this maths book, and through the other chap... at the end of the lesson, I picked up this maths textbook and just chucked it at this other chap, and it hit him in his eye. I think probably the same eye that the little boy, the cousin of the bloke I knew, had been, I think, probably the same eye that the little chap of the cousin of the bloke I knew, it was the same. I think the same eye as the little chap, that had whited over. Now, it seems strange that I should dream that dream of this little chap, having his eye sort of go like that, and the fact that this other bloke that I chucked the textbook at was actually talking to the little chap's cousin at the time. Now, I think it's quite strange that I should dream about this chap that I didn't know very well, this little... Now, I think it's quite strange that I should dream about this little chap, who I didn't know very well, and that his eye had whited over, and the fact that the bloke I hit with the book... God. Now, I think it's quite strange that the little chap who I dreamt of, that had his eye whited over, it happened to be his cousin that was talking to the boy that I hit in the eye with a textbook, and it was 3 days later, like several other things had seemed to have happened. And it happened to be... And it was 3 days later, like several other premonitions, if you like, had happened from... And it was 3 days after I dreamt it, like several other premonitions, if you like, that I'd had. A college friend of mine told me recently that she'd had kind of like a nightmare a while back now. She dreamt that her dad's car had got broken into. The windows were smashed, the locks were done, the lot. And at the time, her dad didn't actually live with her in her house. So, at the time, her dad didn't actually live with her. So, she didn't sort of see the car next morning, sort of all battered up outside the house. She obviously thought that was just a dream, and why ever did I dream that, sort of thing. And the next day, I think she just actually got up, and she was... and I think the next day she just got up, and the phone rang, and it was her dad, and he'd said, "Hey, my car's just been broken into." And he'd said, "My car was broken into last night," and he was sort of, obviously really upset. And, of course, so was my friend, because, she'd had this kind of premonition, and it really freaked her. And, she thought it was really strange. Okay, so sound effects now. This is the one of Martin Folkes' story. The door opens, there are footsteps, and pressure goes down on the bed. The bed creaks, so here we go. I don't know what that sounded like. I'm getting tangled up in cables here, so let's try that again. I think it sounds fairly good, actually. I'll just crank the mic up a bit. Right, here we go again. I have to hold the mic a bit stiller than that, aren't I? Let's try that again. It's a matter of keeping a free hand to open the door. Right, I can't see the level now. Okay.
Where's that creaky floorboard? I found a creaky one before. Do you think I can find it now? There was a creaky floorboard somewhere. Oh well. Here we go again. Take 5 million. Right, here we go again, and hopefully this is the final take with for Martin's sound effects section. Oh, bloody mic clonked again. It's this cable. Alright, let's see if I can do it this way. Right, here we go. No, we got the handle sound, don't we? Here we go again. Right, this is for Sam's voice in ear. Right. Still haven't asked her what the other voice, when she heard it, said actually, but this is Mike anyway. So you ready for this one? Mike! It's a bit loud, isn't it? Try it again. Mike! Still loud. And again. Mike! Still going. Mike. 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 I think we'll do one more before the batteries run down. Mike. One more. Mike. And we'll attempt some foreign murmuring, shall we? Yes, okay. Try something backwards that will then put it forwards again. Okay. Whoops, what have I just said there? Take two. That'll do for foreign murmuring. Right, breathing next for Sam, for Eleanor's cupboard. Cubby hole.
Right, since the battery's cut out on us there, we'll try it again. So all my lungs can take. I'll just try breathing through the nose. Okay, we'll start back here first. Breathing through the nose. Okay, so this is when Billy looks through the curtains and she sort of peeks around her curtains. So we'll just open the curtains just slightly, tweak them. So here we go. I'll actually bring the microphone up a bit higher, so we actually get the top of the curtain rail moving. Okay, whoops. Pull the headphones off there. Okay, so once again then, this is Billy with her curtains. Here we go. Right, 3, 2, 1. Okay, we're going to do that again because that sounded a bit too distant, actually. So, we can't get the mic any higher. But, never mind, we'll do it again anyway. Okay, here we go then. 3, 2, 1. And again, perhaps. Okay, I think that'll do for that one. Right, demon voices and laugh for my story now. Oh dear, I'm going over.
Yeah. Okay, I think I was possessed there. And that's it. Thank God for that. Right, out of my smelly room now. We can go and have a shave and get...
Okay, right, we're rolling.
Right, yeah. I lived in this place called Thornton, which is near Bradford, at Havelock Street, which is at the top of a cobbled road. And basically I had a strange experience in there. I must have been about 4 years old, and I stepped off the top step of the landing and just seemed to float down to the bottom. And I didn't really realise what it was. I knew I'd had this experience, and it wasn't until years later when I explained to my brother what I interpreted what had happened in that house, that he said that he had actually experienced a similar thing, and it could be connected to something that my mother and my father saw in the bedroom, and they saw a cavalier standing over. I don't know what he was standing over, but he was there in the room. So it could have been him helping me down the stairs.
Wait, that was about...
No.
I'll roll again.
Okay.
Okay.
Right, yeah, it's I used to live in this house at the top of a cobbled street called Havelock Street in Thornton, and I had a weird experience when I was stood at the top of the landing, and I took one step off and I seemed to float right down to the bottom. It was a very sort of strange experience, very ghostly experience, and it wasn't until a few years afterwards that me and my brother were discussing ghost stories and things, that he actually experienced the same thing, and this astounded both of us. And after talking to our mother, then she said that she actually saw a ghost in the house in the guise of a cavalier. So it may have even been the cavalier giving us a friendly helping hand down the stairs, but that's open to interpretation. But yeah, it was very strange.
Stairs.
Okay.
All right, rolling.
Yeah, it could have been the cavalier helping us down the stairs. And the strange thing is that when we moved away from that house, it never happened again. So it must have been connected with that house in some way. But I'm not clear why. But it was very strange.
Fine, brilliant.
These are the help me's.
Help me. 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 Help me.